Hey guys, so we are going to be learning about Mesopotamia and how their civilization came to be. A little bit of this will be some review from our geography unit, but the rest will be something new that about Mesopotamia that we haven't learned yet. All right, so what is a civilization? A civilization is a group of people living and working together for the purpose of creating an organized society. So they're going to come up with these different features that make the civilization, like cities, government and laws, writing, division of labor, social classes, public buildings, structures, religion, artwork, and the location of all the civilizations is going to be determined by the resources of the land. So whether or not that land can help with crops, or is it level for building a structure, all of that's going to depend on what resources the land has for them. So with finding the perfect location, they traveled the world to find the best location to settle permanently, because if you remember from our land bridge notes, we learned that there were nomads, and those were the people that they didn't have a permanent home. They traveled so that they could find their food. So wherever their food went, they followed. Now these people are looking for an actual permanent location to settle. The people of Mesopotamia found a place in a region called the Fertile Crescent. And it became known as the land between two rivers, which we know, and those two rivers were the Tigris and the Euphrates. And the reason why they picked that location is because of those two rivers. It allowed the soil in the land to be super fertile, and it was great for crops. All right, so the geography of Mesopotamia. And Mesopotamia is located in what would be modern-day Iraq, in the Middle East. The major features were those two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates again the Fertile Crescent, and also the Persian Gulf. Having that second water source definitely helped. The Mesopotamia civilization is part of a region called the Fertile Crescent, and that civilization was built along the two rivers, and as we already know, they were the key to life and success for Mesopotamia. So the beginning of agriculture. The rivers flowed from the mountains down to the Persian Gulf, and the early settlers farmed the land and used resources from the land to improve their life. So they got things like wood to build boats, or they had metals and stones, and that helped them build the tools. Cities began to develop along the rivers, and early settlers had to learn how to irrigate the land along the banks, because remember, there was sometimes flooding, and they didn't know how to control the flooding, and they didn't know exactly when it was going to come, so they used that irrigation system to help keep the water from flooding their crops and ruining it, or hold on to the water to be able to use it when they don't have, if the river is low, or it's not in a rainy season. So they also had to create order. Due to the population rising in Mesopotamia, it was important to have this order. So the first system that they used to create order was a division of labor. Every person in the civilization had a different job to create a successful and well-rounded civilization. The second system that they used was a social hierarchy, so that meant every person was put into a certain rank. And basically, the more important that your job was, the higher up the social pyramid you were. They also had independent empires, which made the large area of Mesopotamia easier to control. So each empire had their own laws, army, government, and leaders. And then oftentimes the empires were competitive with each other for control over land inside of a civilization. So their very first empire, was a place called Sumer, and the people who lived there were called Sumerians. And if you remember, we watched a video on, I want to say it was in the religion unit, with the little girl who kept like a log of her day in Sumer. So if you remember that, that's what these people are. It existed from 3000 to 1800 BCE. And then the Empire of Sumer had many cities, and they shared the same culture and traded with one another. Some of the inventions that Sumer is known for is an agricultural society, the wheel, and cuneiform, which is the very first writing system ever developed. Second empire The people who lived in Babylon were called Babylonians, and they existed from 1800 to 1200 BCE. And the inventions that Babylonia was known for was the calendar and laws. And that's where you're going to hear about King Hammurabi, who had the Hammurabi's Code, and they were really, really strict rules and some intense punishments. Then you had the Third Empire, which is the people who lived in Assyria, and they were called Assyrians, and they existed from 1200 to 539 BCE. And they were fierce warriors, and they were really good at coming up with strategies for war and conquering other surrounding civilizations. And the inventions that they were known for was trade and being so good at war. Religion in Mesopotamia. So the people who lived in Mesopotamia were polytheistic, and as you remember, polytheistic means the belief in more than one god. And they each had a ziggurat in the center of their land. You learned about that in the religion unit, and that's, where they went to praise their gods, and the priests were, and they could go get help and go there. And they were also, each empire was connected by their religion. It was thought that the god or the goddess was assigned to each different empire to protect it, and they were important because they dealt with nature and daily life. So when just looking at the map, it's asking you obviously some questions. So it says one. Well, the numbers are a little bit off. It should be 1, 2, 3, 4, not 1, 1, 3, 3, but that's all right. What two rivers run through the Fertile Crescent? So we know if we look at the map, we can see we have the Tigris and the Euphrates. And then it asks, what body of water do the rivers flow into? What sea is located to the west of the rivers? What is the area called that is shown by the color pink? So going back to the second number one question, if we look and we see the body of river, if we trace it from the top to the bottom, we can see that the body of water that the rivers flow into is the Persian Gulf. The first number 3 question, what sea is located to the west of the river? So if you think about your compass, the sea that is located to the west, we actually have two, well, the Red Sea is more southern, but you have the Mediterranean Sea. And then it says, what is the area called that is shown by the color pink? And that would be our Fertile Crescent. And you can see it kind of goes in that crescent shape. If you think about the crescent rolls or a crescent moon, you can see it kind of sort of resembles that. All right, so that's it for Mesopotamia. And I'll see you all tomorrow.